everybody. Welcome to Mental Health Matters, the podcast that breaks down stigma, makes mental health okay to talk about around the dinner table. And as always, if you're curious about supporting us in this venture of podcasting, you can be a sponsor. So contact Debbie Dugan, Dugan, DDUGAN at CCSTL, and you can figure out how to become a sponsor. So as always, we do our best to bring on entertaining, informative guests. And now we have round two with Jennifer McDaniel of McDaniel, I want to say McTrition, McDaniel Nutrition, right? So Jen, how are you?
Today is a good day. I'm glad we didn't do this yesterday because yesterday was not a good day. And, I think that's what a lot of us are experiencing, not only like day to day, variations in mood, but like minute to minute variations in mood. But I got a good night's sleep last night, so I'm feeling a bit more grounded. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I mean, truly, it is that concept of the ebb and flow of our own mental health. And for those of you that always listen to us, right, you always hear me talking about we all have our own ebb and flow to mental health because we all have mental health. Some people have a mental illness, but we all have mental health. And now that ebb and flow is really interesting because of our stay-at-home orders, COVID-19 crisis that's going on. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring you back to kind of talk about some of that world when it comes to nutrition, as well as we'll get into some sleep and exercise and thinking along those lines as well too. But first, McDaniel Nutrition, tell us a little bit about that. Refresh our listeners' memory.
Sure. So we are a group of registered dietitians. There's a total of 4 of us. And we focus in a few areas, weight management being one of those, family nutrition, eating disorders, sports nutrition, and we've been doing a lot more of gut health as well. So things like IBS management. And then we also work with companies in terms of corporate wellness and just helping to create a better corporate, healthier culture. So those are the main areas of McDaniel Nutrition based in Clayton, Missouri.
Awesome. And you have a website, right?
We do, McDanielnutrition.com. Lots of free resources up now for individuals in terms of meal planning, stress eating. So feel free to visit the blog and the resources for some free support.
Okay. So let's get right into it, right? You said stress eating, right? Because right now we have something we've never, ever experienced before, right? In our lifetimes. And, even for some of our most oldest of that are living right now, they might have experienced some stuff like this long ago during wartime and things of that nature. But ultimately, the stress is beyond comparable right now. So, and a lot of times what we know is stress eating comes about and we're at home, we're around our pantries all day long. So First and foremost, stress eating, what is it?
Well, stress eating is really about turning to something like food when we feel a negative emotion. I mean, a lot of times we eat out of pleasure too, obviously, and there's people who emotionally eat when they're just having a great day. But I think most of us, make the connection that when we're feeling bad or stressed or even bored, that food is something that we can easily turn to. And it's just a way to make ourselves feel better because when we eat, it turns on the pleasure center in our brains. So it's only natural that our bodies would have that instinctual desire to go to something when we're trying to numb out a negative feeling. And to be honest, what I'm telling my clients right now is a little bit of emotional eating is okay. And we have to have some more grace and compassion with ourselves during these times, being more kind and really tending to our needs than ever before. Because when we emotionally eat, there's 2 things that can happen. We can give ourselves grace and compassion after it happens, or we can turn into more guilt and shame. And that's really what breaks down our health, is when we fall into that place of regret and shame that's not necessarily helpful. So I think that how we handle the aftermath of stress eating is really an important piece to consider.
Yeah, the guilt and shame of that, I go through that myself from time to time. I might sneak a Pop-Tart here and there. But yeah, I mean, we do beat ourselves up with that, right? So, from that mental health side, then all of a sudden that puts us, that affects our mood. So we go from, okay, this tastes really good. I'm enjoying this. Then all of a sudden I'm done with it. And I've got this feelings like, oh, what did I do? Why did I do that? I had so many good days in a row of eating, and I build these expectations up. And I think sometimes, I don't know, my thoughts are sometimes we put these unnecessary expectations on us when we're eating and around our food. And then, so from your standpoint, then how do you work with somebody to maybe help understand, the basics of that?
Yeah, so I think it's looking at what happened before the emotional eating, right? Can you back it up a couple of steps to look at the scenario that led you to the pantry? And a lot of times it can be automatic. We're in the pantry, we've eaten something, and we don't even know what happened beforehand. So I think part of it is just beginning to elevate the level of awareness around what happens, what triggers us before we emotionally eat. And then the second piece is looking at how did I handle it afterwards? Because we could have two completely similar situations in terms of eating the Pop Tart. Let's use your Pop Tart as an example, right?
Fine. Okay.
You know this about yourself. You like Pop Tarts. What kind of Pop Tart, by the way? What's your favorite flavor?
I'm a strawberry kind of guy. And then
Me too. Frosted
oh,
strawberry kind of girl. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
So let's use that as an example. Intentionally, maybe you make the decision that I would like to have a Pop Tart today. So what you do is you get the Pop Tart out, open in the package, have a seat, taste it, enjoy it, put it away, no guilt, right? Versus the opposite might be you've already had dinner, you're really full, but you're bored, you don't think about it, you go and eat a Pop Tart, you eat it quickly, you're standing up, you're not even really paying attention to how it tastes. It's gone, you don't even realize it, and then you feel guilty, right? So those are completely two different ways of eating that Pop Tart. And because it's two different ways of eating it, you also have physiological different emotions and hormones going on in your body. The mindful eating of the Pop Tart, stress was actually lowered. You enjoyed it. It was mindful. Cortisol decreased, right? Those hormones. The opposite situation, elevated hormones, stress. And when we're stressed and we've got elevated hormones, you actually store more of that food as fat, right? So I think part of it is just getting intentional about eating those foods. It's not that we should say they're off the list because we know well from the research that when people overly restrict themselves, they're much more likely to binge. So if we can just do a little bit of work around trying to intentionally eat the foods that we enjoy during these times, like I'm intentionally eating more chocolate every day right now. And there's no guilt about it. I've made that decision, that I'm going to have more dark chocolate than I normally do. And I'm actually going to have a glass of wine at 5 o'clock because that's been a nice little, just savor the glass of wine at that time versus shooting a shot of bourbon, right? So there's just
Mhm.
different ways of handling these foods. And I think that if we can just take a couple steps back and look at our patterns, look how stress eating plays out or how it plays out in our lives, we can make adjustments and help improve it.
No, that is some great examples there. One, it sounds like you're in my head walking around eating Pop Tarts. But yeah, I mean, like as you're talking about that, I'm just picturing that because for most of the time, for me, like I'm just grabbing it, walking around, going whatever, maybe sneaking one every now and then so my kids don't see it. But the reality is, you're right. If I was to sit down and enjoy that and have a whole different perspective on surrounding that, intentional wise, it would be a whole different experience. So
And
that
what a
mindset,
great, yeah, and a great experience for your kids to see you doing that too, versus them
yeah,
catching you in behind the pantry.
that's never happened. Maybe twice. Yeah. Um, so during these times, right, when we're staying at home, we have COVID-19 crisis going on. We're watching the news, so things are all about like trying to be as healthy as possible, right? And so we've also been hearing, and I don't think there's enough conversation around it, but conversation surrounding how to eat to boost your immune system, and what kinds of things should you be trying to eat. Because we also know people are going to the grocery store and they're buying mass quantities of food, right? But what are
Yeah.
things you should be stocking your shelves up with to do your best with providing some immunity with your nutrition.
Mhm. Well, to be fair, I think what we're talking about is really how we should be eating all of the time, right? So this isn't specific to antiviral,
Uh-huh.
antibacterial. This is just the way that we really should be eating. And the Mediterranean diet, which a lot of people have heard of before, it's won awards year after year in terms of being the most well-balanced, easy to follow way of eating. Has a lot of evidence in terms of also helping to boost our immune system and reducing inflammation in the body. And when we talk about inflammation, inflammation starts in the gut. And it's really important that our listeners understand the connection between why we should take care of our gut health if we also want to have a healthy immune system. And the relationship is the fact that you have 70 to 80% of your immune cells in your gut, right? So when we feed our bodies the right foods, that helps to support those bacteria, and then the bacteria therefore support our overall immune system. And their food of du jour is fiber, right? So the Mediterranean diet, going back to the Mediterranean diet, is very plant-based. Lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, a reliance on plant-based proteins, things like beans, anti-inflammatory fats from things like fish and olive oil, and smaller amounts of meat in particular. Dairy is included, and then a very small amounts of, say, sweets and what we might consider ultra processed foods. So by having that higher plant-based diet, you're getting more fiber, you're getting more vitamins and minerals that have been shown to protect us from viruses like vitamin C and zinc. You're also getting a lot of what we call polyphenols or antioxidants, which have been shown to help support our gut health as well. So when we're talking about how should we stock up our grocery shelves, we really want to think about buying produce in a variety of different forms, because if we buy all fresh, we're going to waste a lot of it, right? We just can't eat that much fresh food quickly. So when I think about the organizing my grocery list, I buy a lot of frozen vegetables and fruits. I buy a lot of canned beans and some canned vegetables. I'm making more of an effort to get shelf stable fruits and vegetables that will last longer. Things like sweet potatoes, butternut squash, onions, garlic. Um, and I'm spending a little less right now on fresh things like fresh, spinach and berries and those sorts of things. Those are kind of like a treat that we buy, but we might eat it quite quickly. So that's sort of the first step, right? Is just getting more of that produce into our house. And once we get the produce into our house, we have to make sure it actually gets eaten. So if you've got a little more time on your hands, you might go ahead and sort of prep it to be eaten. Because if you've got fruits and vegetables that are front and center in your refrigerator or somehow stored in your pantry, you're going to eat those things more. There was a study done that looked at when people put their fruits and vegetables in clear containers in the middle of their refrigerator versus when we call the rest in peace composting drawers, those refrigerator drawers, that they
Rest
ate
in peace.
4 to 5 times more produce. So it's good to buy all this stuff, but we also have to make sure that we move it, and we eat it. And so that takes a little bit of more prep time on our parts as well.
When we've talked before too, you've talked about organizing the pantry and having certain foods in front, and I think that's something a lot of people don't even think about, because what is simple, what's in front of you, right?
Right,
And
right.
I like the whole rest in peace part, because that is so true. Everything in there always gets old, and it's like, how did that happen? We just bought it, but it's like, no, it was like 2 weeks ago. We never ate anything.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that, there are a few people who have more time on their hands, actually. They're doing a little bit less work. I'm not one of those people homeschooling 3 boys right now, but there are some people. And so for those people, this is a good time maybe to clean out the refrigerator, really wipe it down, get it nice and sterile, using some bleach water or something, organizing your pantry a bit more. But when we create an environment that's easy to make the right choices, then you're going to eat better. So if you've got Oreos in front of the pistachio nuts, you're 30% more likely to eat the Oreos than the pistachios. So how we place our foods really influences our choices at a subconscious level.
So when you get one of your clients and they start on this road to maybe a lifestyle change and how they view food and nutrition, um, what do they report back after they start eating in a more balanced way, in a more nutritious way? Because I know, like, even if I put a few weeks together of eating really good, right, I feel better. I know I do. But like, what's from your experience? Like, what do you hear from your clients as well as just people?
Yes, I think you're right. To focus on the actual feeling, especially if someone's been fairly consistent in eating well for a while, the energy that they have is better, sleeping better. They actually just feel lighter, per se. You know, their exercise tends to go better because they don't feel so heavy and sluggish. So everything just works well. It's like a well-oiled machine. And then when they happen to go back and have that cheeseburger and fries from wherever, then they notice, wow, I really feel heavy. That didn't sit as, it's just sluggish now. So it's almost like more in their face than it's ever been. And that's a good negative consequence, for them to realize the difference between healthy fueling and what it feels like to go back to maybe some, poor ways of eating.
Hmm. And I think that's so important when we start recognizing the impact eh, eating, right, and just taking care of ourselves overall has on our brain, right? So often when we talk about physical health and mental health, we think about our physical health like, okay, so I'm going to lift weights and I want to build up my arms, get my arms toned, right? So I'm going to do a lot of curls and everything, and then I can see how it looks, all right? So I can see that influence. So then with eating, right, and we don't see exactly what it does for the brain. We can maybe see where we're losing inches and here and there, but the impact that healthy eating, as well as sleep and exercise, and I think we'll probably get into talking about that too, but like the brain is being affected. Why would it not be affected? We know that lifting weights will reshape the way you look, right, of your arms. Why would taking care of yourself in that realm not affect your brain as well too? And I think that's what we forget about a lot of times.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we're really good about focusing on things like, our hygiene, brushing our teeth, and our physical hygiene, things like going to the gym. But we do forget about the importance in caring for our mental hygiene. And there's obviously, as you know, as a therapist, many ways that we can care for our mental hygiene. But the food that we eat directly has an impact on the function of our brain. And there's lots of studies out there that have shown that. For instance, there's one study called the Mind Diet, and it looked at the various, foods that people eat that really have an impact on cognitive function. And we know things like eating fatty fish, lots of salmon, for instance, have an impact on helping people with depression, almost as equally as some of these pharmaceuticals out there. So there's a lot of things that we can do from a dietary standpoint that positively impact the way that our brain works. And on the flip side, being dehydrated, having too much alcohol, eating fast food, saturated fats, that does the opposite. So I think that when people begin to have the consistency of eating the right foods for themselves, not only do they see themselves improve physically, but mentally, there's a huge shift as well.
As a therapist, a lot of times when I'm working with somebody, I'm originally checking in with them about how they're eating, how they're sleeping, how they're exercising, because those are three things you can do relatively free, right? And sometimes we do hear how, well, if I want to eat healthy, it costs more, and sometimes there's some truth to that, but the reality is those are three things that we're eating, sleeping, and how we exercise as well. So, we've kind of talked a little bit about nutrition, but also sleep plays a really important part of that as well too.
Sure, sure. I mean, we could talk about sleep for an entire podcast. I'm obviously not a sleep expert, I'm a dietitian, but when my clients come in, that is one of the first things I talk about with them as well, because it impacts their body weight. We know that people who get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, can lose weight more easily than someone who's getting less sleep. And from an immunity standpoint, because I think bringing it back to just how can we support our immune systems, what we've seen is that people who get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night only had like a 17% chance of getting a respiratory virus when exposed to the virus, compared to those who got 5 hours of sleep or less, who are 50% more likely to contract the respiratory virus. That was a study that was done. So the more sleep we get, the better our immune function works. And therefore the opposite. If you're not getting, a lot of sleep, and I mean, you can feel it. I don't know about you, but I had a couple bad night's sleep earlier this week, and my entire body just felt like it had been hit by a truck. Immune system taking a huge dip. So, you really can tell, you can feel it. And now more than ever, this is a time where we need to have our bodies in tip-top shape, and sleep is the thing. Past diet, really, past stress management, and getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, in my opinion, is the best thing that we can do for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and you think about when you do get a good night's sleep, right, and how fresh you feel the next day, and you feel so invigorating on so many levels, right?
Yes.
Now, exercise, right? And that comes to mind as also, you mentioned it earlier about staying hydrated. Water, like, okay, so I've seen people carrying their jug of water around. They're like, I'm going to drink this gallon of water today, and this is the diet that I'm on. And it's like, how much water should we be drinking to stay hydrated? What's healthy in that sense? Is it 2 gallons? I don't know. But like, what's your recommendations on that as well?
Well, it's a really individual thing. The Institute of Medicine has guidelines. I want to say it's like 93 ounces a day for women and over 100 ounces a day for men. However, what we have to take into consideration is things like tea and coffee and, your LaCroix waters, all those sparkling waters, those contribute to hydration, as well as the fruits and the vegetables that we eat that are 80 to 90% water. So we get the majority of our liquids from like fluids that we would drink, but we also get them from the food that we eat. And then how much water someone needs in a day is also going to depend upon how much exercise. So if they're exercising a lot, like yesterday, it was really hot, they might need more fluids that day than they would on a day where they're less active and they're staying indoors. So I think the easiest way to know whether or not you're hydrated well is the color of your pee. So if you've got apple juice colored urine, you're not doing a very good job. We're looking for like a pale colored lemonade
Hmm.
tone to it. So
Okay.
not necessarily, you don't have to look for clear. That might be going too far, beyond the mark, but you should be looking for like a light color, and you should be going every, 3 to 4 hours. So hydration is important from an energy standpoint. I know for myself, when I'm tired, a lot of times it's just because I haven't kept up with my hydration for the day. And it's time to sit down and have a big glass of cold water, and I end up feeling a little bit better.
Going back to gut health, because sometimes I go back and forth in the conversation, right? Um, but,
Sure.
but going back to gut health, right? When we and I think for a while, I think people were thinking like, okay, that's kind of a catchphrase going on, right? Because that it became popular, it kind of became part of culture, right? We heard a lot more of it, but it's kind of subsided. But going back to the importance of that and what we put in the inflammation part of that as well too. So can you kind of review a little bit in regards to, from an inflammation standpoint, why is that bad for our bodies to have that?
Mm-hmm. So our gut health, when we think about, what it would look like, I want you to envision like, your cells, and they're really tightly joined together. And what happens when they're inflamed is that they begin to separate and they begin to look inflamed, right? Red and kind of, a darker color. And when our guts are slightly inflamed, and that could be inflamed from a multitude of reasons, maybe you exercise too hard, right? That could be something that could happen. Maybe you have a poor diet with lots of saturated fats and added sugars in it. Maybe you're drinking too much alcohol. So there's many ways. Maybe you had an antibiotic, round of antibiotics. There's many things that can disrupt what the intestinal cells look like, and also the bacterial, the microflora within there. So when those intestines get inflamed, it kind of lets a lot of bad things into the system, and causes that imbalance of bad and good bacteria, and really these inflammatory chemicals going around in our body. So we can heal our gut. And some diets have shown that within even 24 to 48 hours, the changing of our diet can really change the bacteria that we have inside. And we've always got a mix of good and bad bacteria, right? No one's just got only good or only bad bacteria.
Mhm.
But when that relationship gets disrupted, then we tend to get more inflammatory issues going on in our body, and we start to break down in terms of our health. So, what we can do from our standpoint is eat the right foods that we talked about earlier, manage our stress, do our exercise, and then, do healthy lifestyle things like not take too much ibuprofen, not drink too much. Those are all things that can disrupt the microbiota or the bacteria in our colons.
And of course, and then let's just keep pointing it out, right? How it all feeds into the brain as well too. So all those
Mm.
aspects of our entire body that we're trying to improve, and sometimes we're just trying to look better in that sense. As to with summer coming on, people are like, "Oh, I just want to," but the impact it's having on the brain is amazing to me, right? Which then affects the chemicals in the brain. And when we talk about depression, and we talk about some of those other mental illness disorders that are out there. But I mean, depression from the sense of, being very basic way of looking at it, there's a depletion of chemicals in the brain, right? And so sometimes we do have to take an an antidepressant to be able to put those chemicals back in the brain. But if we're doing all that we can from a nutritional standpoint,
Mm.
then there's greater chance that we can use ourselves to overcome some of those obstacles in our way. And I think going back, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even as a compliment, a lot of times some of the studies have shown that a good diet in complement to an antidepressant improve the efficacy of the outcomes. So, it is something that it's there's less side effects, right? You get side effects
Mhm.
with some of these medications, and it's not to say that people don't need them, because there's certain people that absolutely do. But I think that by doing all that we can from a dietary standpoint, is really, an optimal way to go about it.
And we're in a time now with people being at home more, right? You might be working from home. You just might have to be at home, right? For unfortunate circumstances, we have people losing their jobs and things of that nature with this crisis going on. But it also gives us time to have more time to think and time to reflect. And if we look at a time for some opportunity to maybe to improve ourselves, we can take, hopefully the people that are listening to this podcast will hear this and we can spread it out there. But the reality is, like, let's take this time and figure out how we can make some improvements in ourselves, because even from the way we're organizing our pantries to what we're putting in our body can affect our overall mood. And we're really needing that right now, right? I mean, that's what we're truly needing.
Yeah. Yes, I think I agree with you that this situation is providing some opportunities for us to take a deeper look, almost forcing ourselves to look at some things that maybe we haven't had the time or had the opportunity to see before. I know, personally speaking, having this larger up and down of emotions and just kind of learning to sit with those emotions and paying attention to them, and honoring them a bit more, allows my own work to deepen, to know myself better. And when we think about that related to stress eating, or some people, I know my husband said the other day, like, sales of Jim Beam are 80% up, you know? So,
Hmm.
people are dealing with this in many different ways. And you can go one way or the other. Your health can decline during this time, or your health can go in the other direction, because that's, what it takes in order to survive this, and come out of it better in the end versus the opposite. So, for some of us who do have a little bit more time to spend getting to know ourselves better, to look at our habits more directly, I think that there's the silver lining, in some of these experiences for us.
Yeah, for us to be able to sit down, if we're in, and to have the time to think, because even if what we're talking about today, you picture somebody sitting down in their chair, they turn the TV on, the TV's full of crisis, right? Death, what's going to happen next, all the anticipatory anxiety, and then if you realize what's sitting with you is a bag of chips, right? And your Coke sitting over, just eating and watching TV. And if you had the ability to just say, wait a minute, you know, What am I eating? What the water that's there? And those are the things, from this cognitive standpoint, when we talk cognitive standpoint, that then can create the change. And of course, people like are always here to help, but those are what we want for people to be able to slow down and think about these items in their life that they're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to being intentional about your day. Our routines and our structure for some of us have been completely thrown into something that looks nothing like our life prior to COVID. And it's a real opportunity to either intentionally set up a routine in your day because every habit is either supporting or not supporting your health. And I've seen some people who have taken their routines and kind of they don't really have a routine. And then some other people have decided, you know what, I'm gonna walk every morning now. I don't have to take my kids to school and be on time at this place. So I'm gonna use that time now for me. And I'm gonna go out for a walk every morning. And and we're gonna eat around these times. We're not just gonna have this open kitchen policy. I'm gonna give myself some structure about when our family will eat. And now we have more time to sit down together as a family and enjoy more family meals, which is like one of the number one things we can do as parents in terms of the outcome and the connection of our family members. So there's so much opportunity for some of us by being together, but it does take intention in figuring out what things you personally need to feel most grounded to get through your day and how you can set up that same sort of situation for your family as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've been here today with Jen McDaniel with McDaniel Nutrition, one of the few people that has come back to the podcast as a second guest. So you're leading the charge. You're leading the charge.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I'm so honored. I've seen your guests, and it's a great looking panel. So I appreciate
yeah,
the opportunity. It's always good to be able to spread these messages with you.
excellent. Yeah, well, you do a tremendous thing for our community, and I'm so happy you come on with us and share your knowledge because you're able to break it down and kind of just you keep it simple at the same time, very informative, and that's what we need today. So I'm really happy to have you on again. And until next time, this is Tom Duff, Mental Health Matters. And please remember, you are not alone during this crisis. There are people here to help, and feel free to check in with us at stlouiscounseling.org, and we will see you soon.
This has been Mental Health Matters with Tom Duff of St. Louis Counseling Services. Check out stlouiscounseling.org for more information.